It's the morning after the night before here in Las Vegas, and while many people are nursing a hangover, your checkered flag team are ready to look back on everything that happened here in Sin City. Max Verstappen took the race win, but in the hours that followed the race, the two McLaren drivers were disqualified. So, as you can imagine, there's lots to get into on the show. And luckily, joining me to look back on everything we've seen this weekend are my trusty experts, our lead commentator, Harry Benjamin, and racing driver, Alice Powell. Guys, we've had a few hours sleep and a few hours to reflect on everything over the last 12 hours. How are we feeling?
In need of some more sleep, I think, but we know it's part of Vegas, right?
It is, isn't it?
It is. I'm just very happy I did wake up when my alarm went off. It was a bit of a late night last night waiting for all sorts of things to unfold after the stewards' room and the close of the Grand Prix, but it gives us plenty to talk about at least. That's good.
But look, I've pulled out all the stops for you. We've got a view of the Strip here in Las Vegas. It's a beautiful backdrop. The sun is shining. All that weather we had to deal with over the course of the race weekend has gone, and Las Vegas is doing what Las Vegas does best. So stick with me on this one. And if you're keen to see what I'm talking about, you can find us in vision on the BBC iPlayer or on BBC Sports YouTube channel. But let's get into it, guys, because as we mentioned, we were up late last night. The checkered flag flew around about 9-ish or so, 9:30ish. And then 4 hours later, we got confirmation that both McLaren drivers, Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, had been disqualified. We actually decided to cut and run and go back to the hotel because it was taking so long. But Harry, when the news came through, I think we were by then almost expecting the disqualifications, because when it comes to skidwear, it's almost a slam dunk, isn't it? So tell me, what were they doing wrong out there, the McLarens?
Well, essentially, they've been done for a technical infringement, a double disqualification for both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri, excessive skid plank wearing and the skid block underneath the car. So what happens is, obviously, all the cars want to run as low as they can because that increases the downforce, makes the car go faster. But you have to have a certain amount of depth left over at the end to be measured by the FIA. It's 9 millimetres, and unfortunately, they clearly were running too low during the Las Vegas Grand Prix. The plank underneath the car has worn away slightly. It wasn't by much, but it's enough. Doesn't conform to the technical regulations, and out they go from the Grand Prix. No points for either driver.
You say by much. I mean, in Formula One, we're always talking small margins. We're like, you can barely see it. We're talking millimetres, aren't we, Alice? But everything counts in Formula One. And we did hear Lando Norris being told to be careful out there, manage a few things whilst he was finishing the race. That was all linked to it, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, we were thinking, well, maybe he's low on fuel. And the rumour actually before it eventually came out that was, but on both cars, and it was skidwear, was that he didn't have enough for a fuel sample, which would have been 100% making sense, because we were like, okay, he was losing a second a lap, then he was losing 2 seconds, and then eventually 3 seconds a lap. And we thought, well, it's got to be that. And then I think now he was literally just going slower to make sure that he wasn't creating that downforce, going over the bumps aggressively. Don't forget, this is a bumpy street circuit. So he was trying to manage the wear of the plank, but ultimately it wasn't enough.
McLaren tried to appeal. I think that's why it took so long for us to get an answer from the stewards. There were extenuating circumstances, they thought, that could have got them off the hook. You mentioned, Alice, that it's a bumpy street track. But Harry, ultimately, there's no wiggle room when it comes to this. It's pretty black and white.
No, I mean, Andreas Taylor, the team principal, I think was in the stewards' room for quite a while trying to argue his case. And we saw the return of porpoising, which we haven't seen since really the beginning of the ground effect era, which is this kind of aerodynamic bouncing that you get, elevated by the fact these cars are being sucked so low to the ground, plus the nature of the bumpy street track. We saw it particularly with Oscar Piastri at one point heading down into turn 1 during the race. They tried to argue that that was unexpected from them, so that led to the excessive wear. Add to that, we had red flag practice sessions. We had that incredibly wet qualifying, so they weren't getting enough running to get ahead of themselves in that respect. But they took that to the FIA. There's no conformity for that in the technical regulations, so they can't do anything about it. It goes beyond the scope. So again, it is a double disqualification. And look, we've seen it before in Formula One. If we go back to China this year, Lewis Hamilton was thrown out of the Grand Prix by Ferrari, with his Ferrari for the exact same reason. And even go back a couple of years ago as well, at the US Grand Prix, it was the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc and the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton at that point. Exactly the same reason. So it's not the first time it's happened, and it probably won't be the last time either.
And it's not in inverted commas, cheating, is it? As you say, Harry, they were just unable to get on top of things going into the race. But then the other 18 drivers and 9 teams were, and that's the problem, isn't it?
Yeah, so I mean, it was a bit of a pointless appeal. We could have all told them that was not going to really work because, yeah, as you said, they should have asked us first.
I'd be looking a little fresher, I think.
As we were waiting outside McLaren for about 2 hours, could you just not knocked on the door and said that?
Well,
Let's get on with it,
next
guys.
time I will. Next time I'll be brave enough and I will. Because, yeah, like you said, Rosanna, all the other 18 cars were able to pass it. They've been driving on the same piece of tarmac, the same track as the other drivers, as McLaren, sorry. So, yeah, it was probably one of those that it was probably the paperwork that took a long time, not actually FI deliberating whether, shall we, shan't we? But, yeah.
So the pictures of the podium will tell one story. Lando Norris will be in the pictures forevermore, but the history books will tell a different story. McLaren leave with 0 points, both drivers not scoring, leaving Las Vegas. So what does this mean when it comes to the championship? Because this weekend was pivotal, but it was pivotal if Lando took some points. And now with no points, where does that leave us, Harry?
Well, if nothing had happened, Lando would have had one hand on the trophy when we arrive at the sprint in Qatar in just a few days' time, because it's the sprint next week, additional points, which kind of clouds the maths. And I'm pleased to say that the maths I was trying to do last night at about 2 o'clock in the morning, I think it stands up today, 4.5 hours on.
You're a genius.
Pretty proud of that one. So with no points scored for Norris or Piastri, Norris maintains the lead, but he has now a 24-point advantage over Oscar Piastri. Nothing much changes for Oscar Piastri. If anything, this brings Max Verstappen well into the fray. He could have been knocked out of title contention at the weekend. Now he's brought himself right back in it. He's on equal points, 366 apiece with Piastri and Verstappen. So that means the maths is still complicated, but in Qatar, all Lando Norris needs to do is outscore both Piastri and Verstappen by at least 2 points, and the championship is his. So whilst it is a seismic shift, the momentum is still there with Lando Norris, but it just goes to show that it can change in an instant in Formula One, on track and off it in the stewards' room.
We thought this track here in Las Vegas, the track that we are sitting above and looking out over, wouldn't really suit the McLarens. But when we go to Qatar, I feel that's more of a McLaren track. So actually, does this put Lando Norris and potentially Oscar Piastri in a better position than Max Verstappen, Alice?
Yeah, I would say so. Lando's in the driving seat with 2 races left to go. And as Harry's just told you there, he's doesn't need to get many points. It's Formula One, it's motorsport, it's unpredictable, anything can happen, like we've just seen. But yeah, he's in the driving seat. Oscar, though, we're going to a track that I think favours him more than the likes of, Las Vegas. Those medium to high speed, he has been excelling on the high speed majority of the season compared to Lando Norris. So maybe this is just what Oscar Piastri needs. And it's going to be tough, but if he wins the race and something happens to Lando, Max Verstappen gets involved, George Russell gets involved, and he drops a couple of places, it could, by the time we go to Abu Dhabi, be looking very well. Oscar could be feeling optimistic.
I think if you park the World Championship, which is foolish to do because, of course, that's our huge talking point, Oscar Piastri needs some good results almost to confidence boost himself for 2026, because actually that's still really important as well if this maiden F1 title gets away from him in 2025.
Yeah, look, I mean, even if the result had stood for Oscar Piastri, he still wasn't on the podium. 5 races without a podium. He finished 5th on the road, but Kimi Antonelli was ahead of him in the Mercedes, got a 5-second time penalty, so Piastri finished 4th at the checkered flag, but then obviously thrown out along with his teammate. So another race, 6 races not on the podium. That's a real seismic shift. That's the worry going on for Oscar Piastri right now, because we look back at the start of the season, halfway through the season, after the summer break, first race back in Zandvoort, where Lando Norris had that reliability issue, and suddenly things were very well and truly going the way of Oscar Piastri. And it wasn't just what he was doing on track, because I think we all noted he'd made such a step up from the previous year. He's a man only in his 3rd season in Formula One. I think everyone is quick to forget that. Not as experienced as Lando Norris, but had suddenly done a huge amount of learning in the winter, particularly when it came to tyre management, and was right on the pace and beating Lando Norris week in, week out on the track, and seemed to have the advantage mentally as well with his cool, calm demeanour. But over the course of the last 4 or 5 weekends, he's crumbled. Low grip tracks aren't his friends. We had little to no grip this weekend. So actually, when you look at it that way, maybe there's a few signs of positivity because his pace wasn't completely awful, but he was still behind Lando Norris for the majority of the weekend. That's going to be a huge worry.
I love how the narrative changes in Formula One from one year to the next. Last year, everyone was saying, Oscar's making too many mistakes. It's his second year in Formula One. He needs to pull his socks up. A few months go past over the winter break, and suddenly it's like, he's fighting for his first championship. This is amazing in his third year of Formula One. It's a bit naughty what we do in the media, isn't it, to ramp up these stories. But nevertheless, he needs to find his confidence again and get some momentum going into 2026 with or without a title in his pocket. Well, let's focus on our race winner then, Max Verstappen, untroubled by these disqualifications. That doesn't bother him. As you say, Harry, it's brought him well and truly into the championship fight. He was faultless. He kept his calm, kept his head when Lando Norris was incredibly aggressive off the start line. Got the lead, and off he went into the distance. Unbelievable from the Dutch driver. And it was still tricky, I imagine, for him to handle everything that was thrown at him during the race.
I mean, if you give Max Verstappen a sniff of an opening, particularly on a first lap, he's going to take it. And yeah, Lando Norris was so aggressive, chopping across the front of him going to turn one, that he almost, he missed his braking point, didn't he? He sailed wide. And Max then on the exit of turn 2 was quite aggressive to chop back across. But yeah, Max did a great job. Once he got in the lead, he controlled it. He was never under any pressure. We never heard him come on the radio saying, okay, I'm really struggling here. It was a big unknown for all the teams and all the drivers because of the disruption through practice and the red flags with the weather. They didn't get to do any long runs. So for them, it was kind of like, well, we don't actually know how the tyre's going to react. But Max drove brilliantly. There was a point in the race, I think around about lap 35 to 40, where Lando was told on the radio, we can get Max, go and get him. That message was then relayed to Max. And I don't think he even had a response apart from just lap time. So, yeah, it was another great victory for Max Verstappen.
Can you imagine if Max Verstappen comes through to win this world title at the end of the season? I mean, would it be up there with one of his best? Because, I mean, he's had some pretty pivotal moments over the years when it comes to taking world championships. But if you just sort of step back slightly and look at the wider context of the whole season, what he's gone through with Red Bull on and off track, showed glimmers of pace at the start of the year, but no one had an answer to McLaren. They were out the blocks and away before anyone else could blink. Then we had all of the drama off track, with things going on with Christian Horner and high-level members of that team departing and almost seemingly crumbling around him. Add into the mix Toto Wolff prodding the bear and trying to swirl the rumours that Max Verstappen might go to Mercedes next year. There could be an opening. No, very quick to quash that. Then Christian Horner departs the team himself. Laurent Mekies is installed as team principal. And with his technical mindset, having come through up as an engineer throughout the several teams and working for the FIA too, suddenly it seems there's been a switch in ethos at Red Bull. I think that has really helped Max Verstappen in how they talk about things in the debrief room and in the engineering room after each race and in the build-up to the weekends. I think there's a new atmosphere now going on there, and that's suddenly reinvigorated Red Bull, who've kept on powering with a few upgrades here and there to try and understand the flaws of this car before we head into a new regulation change. Even though it is a blank check, essentially, next year we rip up the rule book, there are some inherent issues with the way Red Bull were building their car that I think they wanted to try and understand ahead of a baseline set next year. So I think that's worked. And if that all culminates in a title challenge, well, it has culminated in a title challenge, but if he can get it over the line, I'd say it's one of his best.
But I think it would also be a bit of a McLaren implosion, wouldn't it? I mean, because they've had the best car for majority of the year, and they've had two drivers fighting, and Max was way out of it. And then all of a sudden, neither of them finished in Austin in the sprint race, and that was like disaster for them. Okay, you don't get big points for the sprint, but it's still. And then they've been eking Max has been eking slowly, and then this, that's a lot of points. They're quite lucky that they've got two dominant drivers, really, because imagine if this was the constructors were still going down to the wire. That would have been a huge loss for them.
So how do McLaren approach the next two race weekends then? Because with Max Verstappen looming so large as a title threat now, with Lando Norris ahead, do they have to now put some eggs into that basket? and make Lando Norris their priority, because then that might be the best way to protect a driver's championship for either of their drivers.
I don't think they can. Having peddled papaya rules all year and the spirit of fairness and giving both drivers an equal chance at not only race victories but ultimately the World Championship, if they suddenly put all their eggs behind Lando Norris, I can't see Oscar Piastri and his management team, which includes Mark Webber, standing for that one bit. You know, at the end of the day, it's been a team error that's cost them this disqualification in Vegas. They have to allow equal racing and equal opportunity for both of their drivers all the way to the end of the season. If they don't, then, I mean, there will be heads that roll.
It's going to be very, very interesting to see how it all plays out over the next couple of weeks. The big winners, aside from Max Verstappen taking the spoils this weekend, were Mercedes. George Russell taking P2 eventually with the disqualifications, and Kimi Antonelli being promoted up to P3, even with that time penalty that Antonelli got for a start infringement. He put on an incredible defensive drive and sort of earned the place then in fact, really, with the disqualifications to take on that last podium position. But coming into the weekend, I think a lot of people thought Mercedes were going to be pole and winners. And actually, during qualifying, you could have been correct, because George Russell was fastest in Q1, Q2, and then a power steering issue affected his chances in Q3. Although he was honest to say he didn't think he had the same pace as Lando Norris to take pole. But they must be so thrilled with their double podium. But we were a bit foolish almost to think they were going to be totally at the top, because they have changed their car, haven't they, Alice, this year?
Yeah, they have. But I think if Antonelli didn't have a poor qualifying, didn't make a mistake, I think he probably would have beaten George Russell, to be honest. So he did pretty much the entire race on the same set of hard tyres. He boxed at the end of lap 1 to take off the soft tyre. And then his pace was incredible. He said after the race he was talking to the tyres as he was going down the straight, just saying, okay, come on, and just another lap. And yeah, he certainly was, because his pace at the end was faster than his teammate. George said that he took too much out of his tyres trying to attack Max Verstappen after Max had come out of the pits.
Which I like. I have to say, if there's an opportunity to take on Max Verstappen for a race win, George Russell is going to go for it, especially given their previous.
Yes, 100%, and we like to see it as well. And he was able to then, Antonelli, fend off Oscar Piastri, and the McLaren was quick, couldn't find a way past. Charles Leclerc joined the party. He couldn't then find a way past Piastri. And actually, eventually, Kimi started to pull away from his rival in Piastri and started to catch his teammate. And you just think, you've done nearly 50 laps on that tyre, and he was hugely impressive and gets a second podium in a row for himself. And driver of the day for me. I know Max Verstappen won the race and did a great job, but Antonelli, outstanding.
And hugely important for the Constructors' Championship as well, Harry. They're really solidifying that P2 position in the standings.
Yeah, hard to disagree with anything Alice has said there. I think George Russell's been mega all season long, but has had a couple of not rough weekends, but he's finished behind Kimi Antonelli the last couple of races. And I think, alluding to what Alice was mentioning there, I think it could have been a third race on the trot. If Antonelli had got his qualifying together, he made a mistake, locked up in those tricky conditions and lost the lap that way. So he had it all to do at the back of the grid, and he did do it. Brilliant defensive driving, keeping the McLaren and the Ferrari at bay for as long as he did. And I think we're starting to see the hype now around Kimi Antonelli. I'll be the first to put my hand up and go, wasn't convinced. Couldn't see what Toto Wolff was talking about. This young Italian kid who's been rushed through the junior ranks, went from Formula 4, skipped Formula 3 into Formula 2, and well, not only him, but Behrman also had a pretty lackluster Formula 2 season. But he had big crashes in Formula 1. He was getting distracted at his home race in Imola, where he brought all his schoolmates to the track, and it just wasn't going his way, and I couldn't see it. But now, I think he's coming to it, and I think Antonelli, ahead of next year, is really ramping up now.
He was testing in Formula 1, middle of last year, and I believe, not as sure this 100% accurate, I knew he wrote off at least one chassis in testing. That was at Abu Dhabi, and I heard that he had potentially written off another. So he did. He had some huge crashes behind closed doors, but he had done a lot of testing. So then I'm in the same position as you, Harry. I was thinking, well, he's done all this testing, a lot of laps behind the scenes. Mercedes were ploughing the money into him. Comes up in the first few races, and I'm thinking, you've had all that money spent on you. and
gotta repay
all that
it somehow.
mileage. And I'm thinking, it's not showing, but you know, the pressure, being on a race weekend is a totally different environment to just rocking up to Bahrain, doing a private test. And yeah, hugely impressed with how he's ending his season. Okay, we've got 2 more races, but I really hope that we can see him take this form into next year.
And he had that off in Monza when he was in the FP1 session, didn't he? And Mercedes were very quick to say he had the off because he was so fast. He was faster than anybody. Like, he was taking on that Autodromo faster than anybody out there. But I feel like George Russell's feathers must have been ruffled a little bit. He's the de facto number 1 at Mercedes, and he needs to re-establish that position going into 2026, because what we're hearing is the Mercedes power unit for 2026 is the one you want in your car. George Russell wants, therefore, to be at the top of the pile when Toto's making, and maybe Mercedes will adopt the McLaren approach, but if Wolff is making some decisions on who gets priority out on track during races next year, Russell needs to be the one that gets the tap on the shoulder.
Yeah, and I think it's been a bit unfair, the sort of rhetoric going on about George Russell this year when he was kind of fighting for this seat potentially with the Max Verstappen threat looming. I think he's well and truly stepped into the shoes of Lewis Hamilton as the team leader of Mercedes. You know, he was still a 7-time champion, and yes, Lewis Hamilton's results were waning in his closing years at Mercedes, and George Russell had come in and started to beat him consistently. I'm not sure we gave him enough credit for that at the time, and he's had his best season so far to date. Russell is a Mercedes leader for the future, and I think if this 2026 power unit rumours are going to come true, I think Russell will have his first chance at a World Championship next year proper. But with the Kimi Antonelli, the young 19-year-old Italian, now starting to find his speed, we could well see a pretty epic battle between these two.
And someone who'll be watching that epic battle will be Sir Lewis Hamilton. He will be frustrated, I think, that he chose to go to the Scuderia Ferrari. He was frustrated at the end of last night's Grand Prix. Qualified dead last. That was a stat. You've got the stat, haven't you?
First Ferrari driver to qualify last in a Grand Prix since 2009. Dear old Giancarlo Fisichella.
And it's not the sort of stat you think a 7-time world champion would be putting to his name as well. It just doesn't sit right. He managed to make his move up the grid, but not as much as Kimi Antonelli. He finished P10 on the road, Lewis Hamilton, promoted a couple of places now because of the disqualifications of McLaren. Where is Lewis Hamilton's mind at the moment? He was so despondent in the media pen when I spoke to him. I asked him about his expectations for next year and whether he was just so keen to get this year done and dusted and move on to 2026. And he said he wasn't looking forward to it. And I had to ask him again. I was like, do you mean Qatar? Are you meaning the next race? And he said, no, next season. And then I was a little bold and I asked him whether he would be here for 2026. Unfortunately, that was too bold. I'm only allowed 2 questions, and he flagged me up on that one and said, you only get 2 questions. So I never got the answer. But I mean, I'm not a gambler. I haven't put any money on out here in Vegas. But there's a part of me that thinks there's an outside bet he won't come back in 2026. Am I mad?
I mean, he put his money on red, didn't he? And it hasn't come to fruition just yet. But we didn't think it would come to fruition this year. This was always going to be a transition year for Lewis Hamilton. He's not only joining a new team and all the basics that he has to get up to speed with. He's joining an institution. He's joining a culture that is Ferrari, the good and the bad side of it. And
we have seen some bad of that very recently, haven't we? The Ferrari chairman, John Elkann, publicly chastising the drivers, saying that they need to talk less and focus on driving more. To have a follow-up weekend like Vegas for Lewis Hamilton to qualify last and just get inside the points, that's not a great response, is it?
No, it's not, considering the qualifying was super wet, super tricky. You think conditions that Lewis Hamilton will thrive in, the great equaliser, it didn't come together for him. But he had a little incident with one of the bollards around the track, which got caught under his front wing, so that slowed him down. There was a communication error about whether he had one last lap in qualifying, so he didn't really get a proper flying attempt. So I don't believe he qualified last because he was slowest of the 20 drivers. It just didn't come together for him on that occasion, but the pace still wasn't there. And throughout the course of the year, he has been behind Charles Leclerc, but we believe Charles Leclerc to be one of the quickest of any driver over one lap in particular. He's also embedded into that Ferrari machine as well as Leclerc. He is the golden boy brought up through the Ferrari Driver Academy ranks, and has had a great season as well, very similar to George Russell, actually, in putting that car in places it probably doesn't deserve to be. But Lewis Hamilton still yet to stand on the podium. The sprint win in China seems like a lifetime ago, and to be honest, almost a bit of a fluke. The last time Ferrari were actually able to run as low as they probably wanted to, without wearing out the skid plank at the bottom of the skid block at the bottom of the car. With Lewis Hamilton, though, when it comes to next year, I think he will be here next year. But if he's saying things like that, I know he wears his heart on his sleeve. But clearly there needs to be wholesale change within that Ferrari team if Lewis Hamilton is genuinely feeling like that. Is he genuinely gelling with his engineer? Is that the right relationship to have on pit wall, feeding him information during the Grand Prix? Is team principal Fred Vasseur still able to keep a hold of this Ferrari team and try and drive forward this culture change that he seemed to have been doing in his early stages? Everyone was so impressed with Fred Vasseur, but ultimately, once again, it's another year where Ferrari failed to deliver. When they were fighting for the Constructors' Championship at the end of the last year, they have faltered. They've fallen to fourth, behind a one-man team of Red Bull with Max Verstappen and a Mercedes that's now got 2 drivers scoring big points. I would point, don't want to say blame, but the lens has got to be put back on Ferrari as a team operationally, because they've got to sort it out, because this isn't on for a team as decorated as the Scuderia.
Sebastian Vettel couldn't do it. Now Sir Lewis Hamilton couldn't do it. What is it, Alice, a racing team needs to be able to be challenging at the front? What are they lacking at the moment?
Well, clearly a quick car. Because
but in terms of management, what do you need as a racing driver? You don't need your big
you
boss
don't need
telling
you
everyone.
don't need your boss, posting out there that they need to focus on driving more and less talking. Well, they have to speak to the media. It's part of the job. You have to go to the media pen after each race, and
you have to face 2 questions from Rosanna Tennant. Sorry,
yeah,
1 question
I mean,
from Rosanna
I
Tennant.
wouldn't give her
Or
any
3
answers.
if you're lucky.
But so it's part and parcel of Formula One, and it's a stupid comment. Really, it's probably Lewis Hamilton leaving Las Vegas.
I thought there was
now,
a Formula One car on the
us.
strip again. I thought we were getting extras.
But yeah, it's frustration for Lewis. I think this dream of going to Ferrari, as well, he has described it as a nightmare. He says that he lives and breathes racing Formula One. He dreams about Formula One when he's asleep. But it gets to a point, if you're not enjoying the sport and you've lost your love for the sport, there's 24 races on a calendar. They are jetting here, there and everywhere. Okay, they travel in luxury, but still, if you have so much love for a sport and something that's been your life since you were 8 years old, if you're in Lewis Hamilton's case, it gets tiring, it wears you down. And Ferrari, it's not a good look for Ferrari, I would say. It's not a good look for Lewis Hamilton, but I'd probably say it's probably worse looking on Ferrari, when they'd be like, well, have they broken Lewis Hamilton? Like, what's happened when you see Lewis so depressed and not getting the results? He's not suddenly turned into a rubbish driver. He's 7-time world champion, and I'm sure he is still capable of winning races if he was in the right car.
I think we'll come back reinvigorated next week for Qatar. We're at the beginning we'll just finish the opening of this triple stint to get to the end of the year. But the one thing that will keep Lewis Hamilton going, and I'm sure of it, will be the fact that he has joined Ferrari. It's a dream, the dream his idol Ayrton Senna never managed to achieve. Everybody wants to be a Ferrari driver. Sebastian Vettel said something along those lines a few years ago, but Sebastian Vettel couldn't do it. Fernando Alonso couldn't do it and take a title with Ferrari. Charles Leclerc hasn't been able to do it. The one thing that will keep Lewis Hamilton going, and he'll believe that he can, is that of all those top-rate drivers, he can be the one to take that title with Ferrari.
And take the 8th world title as well. Very quickly, please might I have your hero of the race, your driver of the day. Is it obvious, Harry?
I mean, yes. I think it's Max Verstappen for me. There were some standout drives there. I mean, we mentioned Antonelli. I would say in the midfield, Carlos Sainz had another strong drive as well after a great qualifying. But Max Verstappen held his nerve. He was equally aggressive going into turn 1 to sort of keep that position and take the lead in the end from Lando Norris. So for me, it's Max Verstappen.
Antonelli, that drive that was hugely impressive on pretty much the entire race on the same set of tyres.
Well, I'm going to agree with Harry. I do agree with you on the Antonelli defensive driving, but Max Verstappen, he has been incredible, just biting away at that big gap that Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri did have, and now he's in with a chance of the title as we move to Qatar. So much more excitement still to come. Harry and Alice, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your time here in Sin City. Formula One moves quickly now to Qatar for the penultimate round of the season. If you've liked what you heard on here, you can head to the BBC Sounds to get more Chequered Flag podcasts. And if you'd like to see us in action, you can find us on BBC iPlayer or BBC Sports YouTube channel. We'll be back in just a few days' time.